Hello, scarred and haunted ones. It's Johnny. I wanted to tell you, all of you, whether you're listening to this from the Sirenicide feed or the Hearing the Haunted feed, I have decided to make a change in the direction of my life because I didn't like where my life was heading. You see, the road I was traveling was going to lead me to a place of being unfulfilled and even more horrifying, incomplete. So I've changed that path, and I've decided to become a full-time writer. Now, I've written about many scary things, but this is one of the most terrifying experiences I have ever embarked upon, and I've been through 3 open heart surgeries. This journey requires a lot of sacrifices, and I'm grateful to my wife and kids. They have been my biggest advocates. Without their understanding, I would have not have made this step. I also understand that I'm very privileged to be in the position that I'm in now. I've spent more than 17 years of my adult life working within the automotive industry, and I loved it. But I have a story within my mind that needs to be told, an epic that needs to be written. I have always enjoyed being a writer and a storyteller over being a car guy, and my priorities lie within my creative ambitions. And about those ambitions, my new 9-to-5 is creative writing and podcasting, with hopefully time for a bit of music sprinkled in between. My first new project is the Back from the Dead podcast. This essay-style podcast will air monthly, with the first episode being out right now. Check the show notes for the link. That first episode is about my experiences with my first open heart surgery at the age of 7, told from the perspective of where I sit now 30 years later. Not every episode of that show is going to be so literal, I promise. I'll be doing some fun deep dive retrospectives into music, video games, movies, TV shows, and lots of other pop culture darkness that needs to be explored. So check it out if you want to hear me do something that's not fiction for once. The next ambition is something I've been working on in what little free time I had, which is the completion and publication of my first tabletop RPG called Wars of Fate, Midland. This game was born in the world in which my novels will be written. Created initially as just something for me to play amongst my friends and help spur up some creativity for me to write about. However, it has become apparent that the story and the gameplay are something people really enjoy. So, through the pandemic, I started putting together a game guide, which is now nearing completion. The Wars of Fate game will also have a short companion book that will accompany it about a year after the guide's release, giving a short story for each of the 16 playable species that lie within the game. Let's talk about an old ambition, huh? Hearing the Haunted has been on hiatus for a while, but I'm going to try to release an episode here and there as financial support is contributed. I will get it back to a regular schedule, hopefully. There is no way I can just walk away from anthology horror. Too many ideals are still swimming around in that muck that is my mind. My musical endeavors will take a backseat to my creative writing. I still plan on performing live a few times a year, and Eon Code will be creating all of the music that'll be heard within the audio dramas, as well as the Back from the Dead podcast. So, don't think I'm stepping away from my first love and creativity. Now, I've gone over a lot of stuff really quickly, but last and far from least is Sirenicide, the name that started it all, the grandsire to all of my creative ambitions here. I've often stated that if we got enough monetary support, I'd return to that show. But that was before I took this bold and maybe a little bit baffling move. So in conjunction with all the stuff I just listed, I've tentatively started outlining a new season of the show. Now, don't get super excited right off the bat, but it has moved from, unless we get a whole bunch of contribution, to this might be something I can swing with this time off now, after the publications. But in the meantime, it has now been moved from the shelf back to the workbench. So, get a little excited. And speaking of Sirenicide, the script book that I've brought up a few times over the past few years is now entering editing for the 4th season, which was the final season. This book is a collection of each script of every single episode of Sirenicide. That way, you, the listeners, can read along with the episodes. Or if you know someone who doesn't want to listen, or you don't want to listen anymore, you can just read the 96 episode epic for yourselves, or they can read it for themselves. This will hopefully be my second publication behind the RPG guide. So, I'm excited. And if you weren't keeping track, that's 4 physical publications I'm working on in the next 2 years, starting with the Midland RPG game guide, the Sirenicide script companion book, the Wars of Fate anthology short story book, and then the Wars of Fate first novel. Full-fledged novel, man. Something I've been wanting to do since I was 15, this story. So I'm so excited. Now that's not including all my digital publications, like what you're hearing here. There'll be the monthly Back from the Dead podcast, followed by the new Hearing the Haunted and Sirenicide releases. So yes, it's a lot of ambition. And that's why I had to cut the daily grind, so I could make this happen. Well, before I give you a sample of the new Back from the Dead episode, which hopefully will make you want to listen to the whole thing, I'm going to ask, please, just $1. $1 a month when you subscribe to the Sirenicide Patreon goes a long way towards making all of this stuff happen. Again, that's patreon.com/Sirenicide. It's a link in the show notes. Please click it. If you can pledge a little bit, that's great. If you've been here pledging all these years, you're why I can do this. This is a big step for me. It's something I've wanted to do for a long time, and I'm ready to make this happen. I also just released some brand new Back from the Dead artwork done by Desdemona. It's this cool grave design with this hand reaching out, holding these orange headphones, which if you listen to the first episode of Back from the Dead, you'll realize those have a lot more significance than just some cool artwork. And I also put per my wife's request, this is one of the most vain things I feel like I've ever done. There's a Back from the Dead shirt with the show art, which is my face on a shirt, which is just weird. But anyway, so that's out there too if you want to check out our TeePublic store. Links in the show notes. Thank you again so much for joining me on this new journey, and I hope you guys are also seeking your dreams out. Now, speaking of dreams, here's a little something from my childhood nightmares. So began the myriad of doctor's appointments between my second semester of school, church, and what little time I had left at home. All 4 avenues of my life were competing in a dramatic 4-way game of tug-of-war for my then stitchless heart. Stitchless heart. Yeah, I don't have many memories of my chest without a scar, and there are very few photos of me shirtless as a child. There is one, though. The day I was born. It is of my father holding me before my first heart cath. That's right, number 1 of the 33 catheterizations was on my very first day of life. Welcome to existence, little guy. Good thing you packed your red-headed pain tolerance. And as a father, I can't imagine what my dad had to go through. Riding with me in the ambulance from Northwest Memorial Hospital to the fledgling Texas Children's Establishment in the medical center. How my mother coped with her brand new baby being ambulanced away, miles and miles away, while she stayed there, healing from birth. The nurse telling my father, "We should take a photo. This will be the only time your child will be completely unscarred." And luckily enough, through the various shunt stents and catheterizations, they did keep my chest clear for a while. Though my rib cage and lower shoulders and groin area took the beating, my heart remained free from the sutures. That time was up, though. For well over 7 years, my breastbone had remained unbroken as it protected my heart from the scalpel's life-saving song. And that song was to be sung, and the first instrument to be played was the needle. I would eventually write a song called Where the Needles Sleep. for that's what I felt. I was a pincushion, something to be poked and prodded. Even at this age, I felt this way. And as I got older, my feelings would get darker. A lot darker. However, my, at the time, Baptist belief and trust in God and heaven were my allies in this first endeavor. I prayed so much, and I was prayed for by so many. I was also in the hands of some of the most talented cardiac doctors in the world. Everything seemed on my side. The needles grounded my innocent optimism, though. Even though I had been in so many surgeries before and was no stranger to their metal bite, I was woefully unprepared for the amount of puncturing and the size of the needles that laid in my forthcoming surgical battle. Check out the entire episode. Click the link in the show notes below. Subscribe and rate Back from the Dead today. Thanks.